Dallas County District Attorney John Creuzot, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Why do you deserve to be elected, do you think?
Well, we had a platform that we ran on, and we had certain things that we said we would implement, and we did. Number one, we looked at the racial disparity on the arrest, misdemeanor marijuana arrest. And as you know from the research, 91 to 95% every year, people of color. Those arrests and jailings take up to 5 to 6 hours, where police officers aren't available to make 911 calls. So the inequity based on race was one reason we stopped prosecuting those cases. And also, as you see, police response times are improving. So that was a benefit for the average citizen. And we've had a study done by SMU, an independent study that shows that, number one, it worked, and number two, it had nothing to do with violent crime. There's no changes in violent crime. There never was any relationship between misdemeanor marijuana and violent crime. We have taken an evidence-based approach to running this office. As I gave you, we recently did an evaluation of our mental health diversion program, which is something that I promised to do. And instead of a 50 to 70% recidivism rate, ours is down to 20. So that means that people are not leaving here and leaving these programs and committing new offenses. We have worked with the county and the judges in reference to how probation violations are handled. We're becoming much more efficient and fair on that, and that's an initiative from this office. And today we have 100 fewer people in jail for that category, probation violations. So we're not filing on people for not doing their community service, being too poor to pay their fees and things. It's having a positive impact. The other thing is I promised to focus on mental health and homelessness. And of course, having been on the city's former committee for homelessness, I've become very familiar with the issue, and we led and initiated the building of what's now called the Dallas County Deflection Center. And so instead of taking that category of individual, a homeless and mentally ill person on a very low-level offense, to jail, where, as you've seen recently, people are stacked up, hundreds of them in jail because they're incompetent and they need to go to a state hospital. Well, we've got another program that's community-based, and they get the services. We just opened it up. It's a Parkland grade facility. It was the first clinic in that portion of Oak Cliff, and so we're working on that. We have lots of hope for it. We also promised to be honest about conviction integrity. We've had some exoneration since I've been in office, but a lot of this is designed to give focus and primacy to violent offenses, and I've given you the numbers of how we have focused on violent offenses, especially murder and capital murder. And I think, as I gave you, if you take from the time I got into office till just recently, I mean, we've actually processed 681 capital murder or murder cases. Our number is very robust on sex assaults, especially sex assaults of children. I don't have that. But we are targeting the people who hurt us the most and holding them accountable. And we're doing a better job than any other administration has ever done. So I think it's a combination of things. Well, I look back and saw, for example, the conviction rate in 2018 and 2017 was 87%. Our conviction rate for this year is 93%. And for example, I don't know if you know this, but last week we tried 4 cases, murder and capital murder, and each one was a guilty and a life sentence. And so what we've done is focused, especially, I'm a trial lawyer. I mean, that's the way I came up in the DA's office. And I was a trial court judge. And so I made it clear to the staff that we're not plea lawyers, we're not cop-out lawyers, we're trial lawyers, and that these people need to be held accountable. They need to be put to trial and let the judge or jury do whatever. But that's our focus, and that's what we've done. And so I think it's been successful. I think that, honestly, this office is the best run office that it has ever been, regardless of who the predecessors were. Because we work with academics, just like our police chief. In fact, we work with those UT San Antonio people. We work with others, and we're actually joining in to his crime reduction plan, certain parts of it. Now, we don't control what happens on the streets. We don't have anything to do with 911 calls. However, when it comes down to understanding the cases and prosecuting them, we're right there with them. And some of the future aspects of their violent crime reduction plan is focused deterrence. And we have already begun our relationship with, for example, Garland Police Department. We're already looking to see who is likely to commit a violent offense. And so what we have as a Garland especially, a non-law enforcement at their choice, non-law enforcement intervention with the person and the family, offer services, offer a way out. And we're having some success in the early stages where people are responding, and we're having some success. And we hope to expand that, but of course we're also going to do it with the City of Dallas, and we've already begun those efforts.
So what exactly is that? So you said a person who's at risk for committing a violent crime?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So academia has looked across, if we can tell that someone's at risk, not that we know. Now, one of the things, we did a back look at all the people who we would have looked at, and academia showed us that about 30% we wouldn't have known about because people just do things. But the purpose of it is to look back for certain things. Have they been involved in a robbery, an armed robbery? Have they recently been engaged with guns and things? There's certain things we're looking for, and not for all of their lives, but in recent times. And what academia has done is lined up some of these variables with people who are at high risk to commit a crime. And so it's my belief that if I do nothing as a district attorney but prosecute cases, the crime has occurred. I mean, the harm has occurred. And so what we're trying to do, and the police chiefs in this community, especially two, at an initial phase, is we're trying to figure out how to get in front of this and communicate to these individuals and their families so that we can stop the violence or whatever it is that they might do. Now, sometimes they don't respond, sometimes it doesn't work, okay? We're in the beginning phases, but where it has been implemented faithfully and according to the research, it has worked well, and it has reduced violent crime. As you know, Dallas is the only major metropolitan area in the United States where violent crime is actually going down. I don't know if you had a chance to see that the other day.
Well, I looked at the statistics this morning, and the latest statistics show, as of Monday, on the city's website, that...
I haven't looked at it that recently, so
okay,
go ahead.
That's all right.
Yeah.
But murders are still up a little
bit. Yes, they are.
And so that's the most violent, but yes, there are others categories that are down.
Yes.
But, you know, the crime in Dallas really went up in 2019, went up in 2020, came down in 2021.
Yes.
I mean, they're trying to get it down through the Chief's Violent Crime Program. But it's still a problem. And so what is your message to voters who are considering you and your opponent in November?
Well, first of all, let's go back to my opponent's years, 2017 and 2018. Violent crime, there was none of it going down. It was all going up, okay? And what I never mentioned that in the campaign in 2018 because the DA's office tries cases. That's what we do. These murders, rapes, robberies, all that stuff. We're going to try a case 1, 2, 3, 4 years later. And then what happened? We lost a police chief, Renee Hall. There was another police chief who came in with an actual plan that, as you know, is continually unfolding, and it's showing great promise. So the district attorney's office does not respond to 911 calls. If you call and nobody shows up, that's on a local police department, not us. What we work with them to do is get the quality of the cases as high as we can, the most amount of evidence, so that we can have a successful prosecution. And that's called accountability. I seriously doubt that anybody who's going to commit a murder this upcoming week, and hopefully none, but if so, really understood that we tried 4 cases last week and got life sentences for people who caused death. And so there's not a one-to-one relationship between trying cases and a reduction in crime. Where the real one-to-one comes in is the quality of the policing that goes on. For example, let's take Deep Ellum. You know, there's a rise in a lot of crimes over there. Okay, what's the response? The DA's office doesn't have a presence there, but the police do. And in fact, they're increasing it. And if you've lived here long enough, you know, Lower Greenville, which is pretty good right now, but at the beginning, because I was a judge and I was trying the cases, okay, there was a lot of crime there. What happened? They arrange things. I don't know if that was the best police response, but at times the businesses had different responses. The police had more presence. The crime went down. So this focused deterrence is trying to get in front of that. But as far as what happens on the street and whether or not crimes occur, I think we are learning and understanding based on this new police chief and his methodology and the acceptance of it by the mayor and the city council that's more impactful on the reduction in crime. If we try a case 1, 2, 3, 4 years later, that doesn't stop what happened from happening. It happened. And so we're holding people accountable.
I interviewed your opponent, Faith Johnson, who you beat 4 years ago. Why do you think that it's going to be the same result this time?
Well, I don't know that it will be the same result. I would never guess that. I learned a long time ago not to guess a lot of things, outcomes of cases, what judges and juries will do, and to predict an election. So I don't know, but I think we'll win. And I think that this community is more in tune with my vision of criminal justice. When we talk about marijuana, for example, she wants to go back to the arrest and prosecution. Now she calls it a memo agreement. And I think that gives a false impression, because you can get a memo agreement, but let me tell you what happens before, which is what you know from the data, from the SMU study, we're making tremendous progress on. What happens before that, and what happened in the past until now, is that people of color have been targeted for traffic stops. If that police officer stops that person, searches the car, finds some small, it's usually 1 or 2 cigarettes of marijuana, okay, they're going to arrest them, they're going to call for a record, they're going to take them to jail, and that's from the police, a 4 to 5 to 6 hour process. Well, let's think about that. If a person has an 8-hour shift and you call 911 because you have a crisis at your home, okay, they're not going to respond because they're in jail booking in some kid, mostly a person of color, and they're not going to be able to do that. So even the police chief changed the rules when he got in. One of the first things he did was 2 ounces of marijuana or less. He said, unless it's for recreational purposes, if it's for recreational, don't take it. There are a few exceptions which align with our exceptions, by the way, and let them go. So when we see violent crime reduced in the city of Dallas, okay, we also see 5% fewer arrests. Okay, so what we're not doing is dragnetting neighborhoods. We're focusing on 300 by 300 grids, as you know, and we're focusing on where the criminals are and where they commit their crimes. And I think, in fact I know, based on the research that they've done, the presentations that they've made, which I was sitting right behind them at the most recent one, that those are the reasons that violent crime is going down in the city of Dallas.
I wanted to ask you about some things that your opponent said yesterday during our interview. She said if she's elected, the minute she gets in, she's going to reinstitute the policy of theft below $750 for the certain items.
Yes.
And so she said that's the first thing that she's going to do, and that shop owners are really wanting that. How do you respond to that? She sees this as a problem and as a choice for people to make.
Well, I mean, first of all, I have talked to the Black Chamber of Commerce. I've talked to the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. We have a very robust and positive relationship with the Texas retailers and national retailers. We meet with their private companies that assist them with theft cases. I was called down to the state Senate on this very issue, okay? And that's, I think I gave you a link to that, okay? There is no evidence that this policy, which she misstates, by the way, okay, has had any impact on the number of those cases or anything else. In fact, that was the first witness in the state Senate, so that was just about over with. The second witness was a police officer who said, we're not even allowed to respond to those types of calls, 911 calls, because we're focused on violent crime. So there are always some other collateral issues out there, and that's been true for a number of years. That's why the number of those cases is low. Our rejection rate is good, same as when she was in office. So I think it's a political point. I think it engenders fear. It's designed to be fear-based and not idea-based. And I think that when we look at the data, that we see it's had no impact. And because I said food, diapers, formula, okay? And I said, if you're stealing for economic gain, you will be prosecuted. And we have had those, and we prosecute them, okay? But the problem is, now that we have had it, the reason we don't have any increase in cases is because the first $100 is a city municipal offense. And I can't tell you, I haven't heard of any increase. I've talked to police chiefs and mayors across this community, and I've yet to find one that said any policy that we have has caused an increase in crime. So I think that the way this is talked about politically is to engender fear as opposed to what the facts are. I've given you the facts. I've given anybody and everybody the facts. I said I would monitor this. If this causes an increase in crime or has any adverse impact, that we would abandon it. And in fact, what we've seen, it's been neutral. And once again, the reason is the first $100 goes to a municipal court. Okay, it's only $100 to $750, and I suppose, I mean, I don't know, we haven't had any increase in cases. The numbers have been going down for years, even before her. And so all I can say is it has shown no impact, nor are there any data to suggest so. So, to the point, I talked to the Black Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic, the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. We have called, we've asked, do you have any data or evidence that this has caused any harm to a business, had any economic impact, any negative economic impact? The answer is no. So we continue to work with the Texas retailers, the national retailers. They have independent entities who you never heard of, who work with them and this office to prosecute theft cases. Now, why are they in there when they're the police to respond? Well, because the police don't always get there. And sometimes they're making cases off of security cameras. And so we need that. We need it given to us in a way that we can use it to prosecute it. So there's a lot of coordination between us and the retailers on the issue of theft. But on this particular issue, I have asked, I continue to ask every time we meet or talk or on the phone, is this policy having any negative impact on anybody that you know? And the answer is consistently no, it has not.
Another thing that she had mentioned was her difference of opinion on death penalty cases. She said you haven't filed any death penalty cases since you've entered office. And she mentioned, as an example, the Shamir case, which I know he received life in prison. And so I'm wondering, what is your response to that?
Well, number one, he will die in prison because he will never get out. So I think when people say about death penalty, they need to realize that what the option here is, the only other option according to law, is that they'll die in prison. So that's where Mr. Shamir will be until he dies, number one. Number two, I think she overlooks and does not discuss the actual law. There's a provision in the law that we have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person will be a continuing threat to society. Well, if they have an automatic life sentence, the courts have said society also means prison. So we look back individually on cases, okay, and see, do we have any evidence from prior incarcerations, current incarceration, etc., that this person fits that category? Because if you look back at the beginning of the current death penalty statute in the state of Texas, it was designed for that person who not only is obviously violent on the streets, but also would be violent in a penal society. And I take that very seriously. That's the law. Some of the cases we've tried handled without death penalty, the family didn't want it. They did not want to go through 20, 25 years. I think she does not recognize and won't talk about the cost that it is. I mean, we can put somebody away, they'll never hit the streets again, and save about $4 or $5 million. That case will never make it to the United States Supreme Court or through the federal courts, which these cases, because you don't work here, I do, you don't know, these cases bounce back and forth, even with ridiculous issues. You know, we have to tell the family that this guy wants a monk next to him before he's executed, and they won't allow it, so the whole thing's been put off again. And so there are a number of reasons why I think this is the most efficient, effective, and I've never said I won't. I've always said I would consider it, and we do consider it, but if we don't have the facts, many people are mentally ill that come through with these types of cases, and that in and of itself is going to give you 10 to 15 years of litigation. And we've had many cases reversed on that issue. The conviction was affirmed, but the sentence, because of intellectual disability, mental retardation, etc., We just have a hard time getting to the point where the person and that case can go through for an execution. It's more complicated than people realize, and very costly to do this.
Is this a case where, you know, it's a message thing? You know, if you have a case in which there is a death penalty, is the message out to the community, you know, of deterrence?
No, there's no evidence of that. In fact, Mr. Shamir Mir was committing his crimes when she was in office. People have been executed in the state of Texas in the last few years. That didn't stop Mr. Shamir Mir from doing a thing, okay? And there is no data or evidence that anyone has ever pointed to that executing one person stops some other crime.
I wanted to ask you about an issue that's come up recently in the OD mapping, which is something that you're pushing. Why is this so important? And why hasn't this been done in a city like Dallas?
Well, your last question, I don't know the answer to. I can tell you that the former U.S. Attorney, Aaron Neely Cox, was working on it before 2019 when I got in office. I don't know to what, if any extent, she worked with Ms. Johnson on it. I don't know. But it's a federal initiative. She, of course, COVID came, she left office after Trump lost the election. And so when we started coming back to work, I refocused on it with our executive director of the Texoma HIDTA, High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And we well, first of all, we called many police chiefs who said yes, 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 yes. Now, that's a city and a technology issue, so, but we need them on board. And after about a dozen of those phone calls, we said, okay, we're looking good. We just assume the rest are going to want to do it. But the biggest city, half our cases, and the vast majority of the known overdose deaths, just the known ones, come out of the city of Dallas. And so really what we need to do is get the city on. So we started, he and I, communicating to the fire chief, to the city attorney, to the police staff, etc. And so we finally got it, and the mayor. And the mayor has taken it and really run with it, which is commendable, and we thank him. And so we recently had a hearing in front of public safety, and the issue has become one of a legal issue of confidentiality, and the mayor has, I don't know if you know this, but
He's written to the HHS secretary.
Yes, so he's written that letter. We hope to get a quick answer, okay? We think since it's a federal program that they would obviously, yes, it's okay, that there's nothing here to compromise a person's confidentiality. So in case you don't know, the information, what will happen is they'll put a computer up to the police computer, to the fire department computer, or if they have an outside contractor, they'll put it up to that. They'll put it up to Parkland, to the hospitals. They'll put it up to the ME's office, and they'll extract certain information, and then they strip all identifying information, including an address. It just gives kind of a broad coordinate of where it is. But what it allows us to do, and which is just, I can't believe that in 2022 we're getting to this, is it allows us to understand where in the community overdoses are happening and whether they're deaths, and also what is the drug. Now, what we have a lot of right now is heroin and fentanyl. As you know, fentanyl is being made mostly outside of this country. It's coming in various ways, in various places, and I think that the way it's packaged to look like a benign drug or some other drug that maybe somebody can get high off of, but it has a lethal dose. It's my opinion, based on what I see, and I don't have any disagreement with my law enforcement partners on that, that people are trying to kill Americans. It comes in looking like Adderall. Well, okay, if you take fentanyl, you're not taking Adderall. Now, some of it is hydrocodone. You know you're taking something that's an opiate, but you don't know that you have a fatal dose of fentanyl in there. So I think that it's high time. We've seen too many deaths. The numbers that we know are outrageous, and we need to get on top of this, get in front of it, and try to save people in this community.
My last question to you is, since Uvalde, there has been a state conversation and a national conversation. On one hand, you have those who say the state needs to pass new laws, tougher restrictions on gun sales. Yes. On the other hand, you have those who say there are already plenty of laws on the books. Sure. for gun enforcement. If you're breaking the law and you have a gun, go after somebody. Where are you on this issue, and do you think that there is an opportunity to get tougher on gun crimes locally?
Yes, well, first of all, we have a very robust plan, and I can give you the numbers here of our prosecution of gun crimes. 76% since I've been in office of the gun crimes that we have prosecuted have been firearmed by a felon. Okay, so we're fully engaged in that and want to hold people accountable. Judges have options as to what they want to do with them, but we're engaged in it 100%. The larger kind of political picture and what to do, I've held town hall meetings with Moms Demand Action, and what they are is a gun safety group, not a gun confiscation group. I don't believe that would ever happen. I don't know if there are any circumstances that would be palatable in this state for that, but we can make guns safer. The other thing, and I think if you go back and look, you'll see that the most recent round of legislation from 2021 that expanded availability of guns to the average person, I think if you go back and look, you're going to see many police officials, especially Eddie Garcia, asking the legislature not to do that. More guns on the street create more crimes on the street. I think it probably creates more unlawful possession of a firearm by felons, because the word is you need a gun. You can have a gun. And so even those who legally shouldn't, they don't make those distinctions. And oftentimes, as we know, we just have a lot of guns. Guns are stolen in robberies. Guns are stolen from gun stores, and those wind up out here in the stream of commerce to be sold, but they also wind up to be used, and unfortunately we have to handle those cases. There are many times that we can track the registration of a gun and see that it was a stolen gun. We don't know who stole it, and it may be a year or 2 or 3 when it's used. But once again, I think that we should be more thoughtful about what we're going to do on this. The national government has recently passed an act. I think that, to be honest with you, it's very disturbing, I think, to everyone about the mentally ill in possession of guns. I think the last story you and I did was the lady from Love Field. I mean, with that history of mental illness, what's she doing with a gun? Well, she probably got it off the black market, okay? And so we have guns out there like that. And we do have significant offenses where severely mentally ill people are using guns in ways to either kill or almost kill or threaten innocent individuals. And of course, they're so mentally ill, as you've seen recently, they get kind of stuck in jail because the state has not funded the state hospitals, and so we can't, the judges, and I don't have anything to do with it, but the judges order them to the facilities, and we can't get them there. And so they're sitting in jail just as mentally ill as when they got here, and that's a tragedy on all sides. The victims, them, and we can't hold them accountable or find out if they're insane unless they become competent to stand trial. So it's a difficult issue. It's not an easy one to resolve.
Dallas County District Attorney John Creuzot, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.